I have told a few stories throughout my time, but I'd be real super pleased right now if I could think of one. First of all, though, I want to thank Betsy. Betsy's always been very gracious and magnanimous about giving the people in the book the credit for the book, and I'm not buying that. Not the book, I've already bought it. But Betsy did all the research, did all the organization of the book, did a great job of writing it, put all those facts in there, and also wrote it in a way that it's a very pleasure to read.
Thank you.
Enjoyed a lot, and I thank you for putting me in there, and I hope that my being in there does not lower its value.
No, not at all. It raises the value.
You were talking about the people, though, that had all those problems with their van. There was a period there in the 70s when at Mount St. Joseph we had a lot of trouble with our van. In fact, we were seeded #1 in the league tournament and started to Capitol to play that game, and the van broke down. We didn't make it. And the next day, the Cincinnati Post had a heading in the paper that said, "It's not whether you win the game, it's how you get to the game." But you know, in terms of starting the basketball program at Georgia, for example, I don't know who I thought I was going down there. I was 24 years old at the time, but I was very intent on that school starting a basketball team. So I went down there and I talked to all the department chairs and the deans and the vice presidents and so forth. And of course it was a long process. And there was, you know, I said this, they said that. But the gist of my argument was, how can this great university, whose entire existence is based upon social justice and opportunity for all, exclude an entire gender from one of its programs that it spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on? And of course it wasn't long before it would be millions and so forth. And also a program that it is always touting as one of its most important and one of its best. It's kind of hard to argue with that line of reasoning, I think. So one day I got a call to go into the physical education office. And of course when you're advocating for all of this and kind of thinking maybe you're stepping out of bounds a little bit, I thought, what are they going to do? What's happened? They still had the electric chair in Georgia. But I went in, and I got there, and there were a lot of these important people sitting around the table. And the chair of the physical education department said, "Jean, we wanted you to be one of the first to know that the university has decided to sponsor women's basketball. And we'd be very pleased if you would be the coach." It was a wow moment. It was a great moment. It was exciting. But, you know, I will say that with the university saying they had decided to sponsor the team, they interpreted that word sponsor very loosely. And in their defense, too, it was no different in Georgia than anywhere else. And I was only doing what women all across the country was doing at that time, trying to get a program started. But we had nothing. We had no access to the facilities. We played in what was called the women's gym. Are all of you familiar with women's gyms on campus?
Yes.
I mean, it's embarrassing. We had no access to the training rooms and to the weight rooms and so forth. They had to buy their own uniforms, their own shoes, their food on road trips, provide their own transportation. I had not one confrontation with them before they decided to sponsor the team, but afterwards I had several. The first one came when we were supposed to go play our first game. How were we supposed to get there? And they told me, "Well, you said if we sponsored the team, you would take care of all this. You'd make it work." So I didn't like that very much, and I said, you know, can't you see the discrimination here? The school is paying thousands this weekend to send the men's team to Baton Rouge on a plane, chartering the flight to go play LSU, and we have to carpool to go to West Georgia. And that's just the way that it was back then. But you know, having to do all of that, the women loved it. They absolutely were thrilled. They were ecstatic to have this opportunity. And they were very determined, they were skilled, they had great attitudes, and because of that, they were a joy with whom to work. I never had not one of them complain. And it was very slow moving, but help was on the way. And you all know what that help was, don't you? The law, Title IX. I suppose all of you know about Title IX, the great federal legislation that was part of the Educational Amendments Act in 1972. When it was written, sports was not even in mind, but of course it became the focus after it was written because that was the area in which there was so much widespread discrimination. So in 1972, that law was written. It was great. It took several years for it to be fully implemented, but of course when it was, I think everyone here, especially people here, realized the giant strides that those women made in such a short time once they got the opportunity. I know I was very thrilled about it. Even though I was at a woman's college, and it really had a negative impact on the Mount because our budgets didn't increase, whereas the co-ed institutions increased by hundreds of thousands at the big universities, and the smaller ones like us by tens of thousands. So, but still, it was a great thing to happen for women in sports. Betsy, I don't know if you realize this, but when you asked me to come to this today, you sent me an email, and you asked me to come to your book singing. Did I? Yeah.
She'll do that too.
But I knew that wasn't what you meant. I figured you meant signing, but I started, just in case.
If you want to sing,
And in thinking about all the trials and tribulations of the people in the book, including myself, I did come prepared to do Nobody Knows the Trouble I've seen.